Hello everybody, olá a todos. Aqui fala Vladimiro Silva. Eu estou em direto. Hoje vamos estar em direto com a Ranae Von Meding, uma doente nossa que fez um tratamento de roupa na Ferticentro. A Ranae é irlandesa e, portanto, esta conversa vai decorrer em inglês. Hi Ranae, hope you're already there. I can see that you are. So let's add you to this conversation to be talking to you today. So let's wait for Renee to connect. Hi, Renee. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How's everything?
Good. Busy with the two girls. Yeah, they keep us
Okay.
busy.
Okay, so I'll start by introducing you. Renee is an actress from Ireland, which is very nice, very posh of us to have an actress doing these kind of interviews. Renee was also one of the first shared motherhood cases that we've ever had in Ferticentro. It was like 3 years ago today, though.
It was like almost 3 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. So it was back in 2017.
I'm trying to think. Or no, do you know it was 2 years ago? Because she's 1.5 now, so it was 2018. I think. Yeah, 2018.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, yeah.
because there was this change in legislation in Portugal, and then from this was a law from 2016 that was put in place in 2017, and then you came all along from Ireland to do the shared motherhood treatment here. You're a very peculiar case because you already had a child from a shared motherhood treatment that you did in Spain previously.
Yeah.
So then you came back to Portugal, came down to Portugal, and things went well. So I know that on the other hand, Renee, she's married to a woman, obviously, because we're talking about shared motherhood, where a woman does the ovarian stimulation and the other one receives the pregnancy. Her wife is also an actress. It's called Audrey.
Well, she's actually she would kill me if I didn't correct you. She's a stage manager. She did train as
Okay.
an actress, but then she doesn't like acting now.
Okay, sorry, my bad. Well, anyway, and I know that legislation in Ireland has been sort of a headache for your family because you are still fighting for recognition, for full recognition of your two girls as your legal daughters. I'll pass the word to you so you can talk to us about your experience. How was everything? I remember that you hired this Airbnb place with no heating, so it was quite an adventure back then.
It was
So,
interesting, yeah. So I guess, yeah, so we ended up coming to you guys because we had originally done reciprocal IVF in a clinic in Spain. And the reason why we're going abroad is because at the time, you weren't allowed to do reciprocal IVF in Ireland. There was just
mhm,
no legislation here to allow you to do that in a clinic. So
mhm,
we were told if we wanted to do it this way, if we wanted to have our kids this way, that we should either go to somewhere like Spain, Portugal, or the UK. So we initially went to Spain. We had our first daughter, Ava, in 2016. But then we just weren't entirely happy with the clinic. We had some failures there as well. And we just decided to have a fresh start and to find a new clinic. And we did research and looked all over Europe to try and find somewhere. And we found you guys and just got a really good feeling. But also, it's a big thing to decide on treatment somewhere and you've never been there. But I suppose being able to video chat was good. I spoke to you first and just got a
mhm,
good feeling about coming there. But that being said, it is a really difficult thing to go abroad for fertility treatment. Like, it's a hard journey anyways, but then if you're adding in, like you said, things like sorting out accommodation into the mix, it
mhm,
can be even more complicated. So the original Airbnb that we booked ended up having no heating, or the heating wasn't working, and Ava was only like not even 2 at the time. She was only 1.5. You know, so we couldn't stay somewhere that had no heating. And Portugal, I think Coimbra was like, had some weird cold spell while we were there. Like, it's normally really lovely and warm, but it was raining, it was cold. So we stayed there for one night, and then we had to find somewhere else. So we ended up finding another Airbnb, which was really lovely, but it was a bit, like, looking back, it was a bit too far away from the clinic and from the center of the city. So I think if we ever did come back for another baby, I think we would probably stay a little bit closer, because it, you know, it was really nice, but we were very much in the countryside. But yeah, there's so many things to like think about when you're coming to a different country for treatment. Like, there was, you know, trying to organize to bring all of our medication with us, because obviously in Ireland all of that gets paid for, so you don't, I mean, so we didn't have to pay anything for our fertility medication, which can be quite expensive for some people. So, but we had to know exactly what we needed from you guys beforehand, and we needed to make sure that we brought it with us and we stored it correctly and everything, because you can't make any mistakes when you have, especially when you have such, you know, a short space of time. You know, if you're living right beside the clinic, obviously if you make a mistake 1 month, you can try again in another month or another 2 months. But when you're traveling for fertility treatment, it's kind of all in that little pocket of time that you have, and you're just hoping that everything goes well. I remember there was other things that went kind of crazy as well. There were some of the blood tests were quite off, and at one point you thought we might have to cancel the cycle because one of the levels was just totally off.
Sometimes phone calls just come in. Just let me make some. Hello, Ranae, are you still there?
I'm here, no problem.
Sorry, it was my phone call. I had to turn it off because sometimes calls just got in and interrupt us. Let's use this talk also to exchange experiences about the different systems and so on. You were talking about medication. How does things work in Ireland? Is medication free for you guys, or do you have to pay for it? How does it work? Just
so we have we have like a universal healthcare system where you can get free healthcare, and if you might have what is called a medical card, or you might have a doctor's visit card, and if you have one of those, and it's all means tested on your income, if you have one of those, you get most of your medication for free. If you don't have one of those, you can only pay a maximum in 1 month in one household. So if, say, all 4 of us had medication we needed to buy, whether it was fertility medication or things for asthma or anything, there is a cap on what you will spend. So it's never going to, I think currently it's around €180. That's the most that you will spend in a month. So you either will get it for free, or it will be less than a couple €100.
Oh, okay. It's a big advantage compared to, well, here in Portugal, we are relatively lucky because the state pays for 69% of fertility medication. There are countries, for instance, like Spain and so on, where patients have to pay it in full. So it's a huge difference.
When you say that, that's a funny story from our first time doing IVF, because we went to Spain and didn't realize that we needed to get our medication before we went, which was one of the problems with this clinic in the first place, that they didn't tell us that we needed to bring our medication or we would be charged a lot. And when I went to the pharmacy to buy it in Spain. They were trying to charge me like thousands of euro, and I was like,
Yes.
and we ended up being able to get it sent from Ireland. Don't even ask me how, it's a very long story, but we managed to get one of our friends to pick up it in a pharmacy here and get a courier to send it to us. So it was amazing. But yeah, you can get caught out for sure.
Yeah, your kids have very it's always an adventure. Well, and it shouldn't be, actually. And so, just to explain everybody how this went, we were using Audrey's eggs, which is interesting because Audrey is older than you, right? I don't want to talk much about your personal history.
Yeah, no, she just turned 40, so yeah, she has good eggs.
Yes, you always say that Audrey makes the best eggs, right?
Yeah.
You carried the pregnancy like you did with Ava, and so the little area was born here. One other thing is that back then, when you did the treatment, donors were still anonymous in Portugal. Now they're not anonymous anymore. So how do you feel about that? In Ireland, legislation actually changed this month, right?
Yes, and now they've banned anonymous also in Ireland. I think that's the way the world will go, is that anonymous donation will be banned. I mean, I have mixed feelings on it, because looking back, I would have loved to not have an anonymous donor, and I would love that if it was an open donor. But, you know, there's always going to be complications no matter which type of donor you choose. You know, obviously you have worries about, you know, the questions that your children will have, or the access to information that they will want. But we did what we could with what was available to us, and that was all that was available to us at the time. So we have no regrets about having them.
Yeah, there's always a thing that I always tell patients, which is this. Nowadays, with all the genetic testing, you can just get a swab from your oral pharyngeal mucosa, send it through the internet elsewhere, and then you end up knowing that you have 5 cousins, and then donors are very easily traceable nowadays. And within some years from now, there is always, in the case of Varia, there could be the possibility of your donor allowing to lift the anonymity, because and in that case, should that happen, she will still be entitled to get access to his identification. Yeah. Okay, the problem with this law is that it is not retroactive, as it shouldn't be, because the donor donated under anonymity, and so he has to agree to lift his anonymous status in order for you to be able to get in touch with him. But I mean, so at the same time, area would have a different right than Iva, and so it will be an issue for the family, right?
Yeah, but as you said, I really think that there's nothing, you know, there's no such thing as anonymous anymore. No one is anonymous. You know, everyone leaves traces, and everyone has DNA out there somewhere, and you know, there's ways of tracking people down. If that's something that they really want to do, obviously we would fully support them doing that, because that's their information.
Okay, one more question, because a lot of patients ask us about this. Can you tell us how, have you ever talked about this with Ava, not Aria, because she's too small for that? How do you handle this information? Because kids ask questions, they have colleagues in school, and a lot of patients ask us how should they do it from a psychological point of view. How should they manage this situation? What's your experience?
I mean, we've thought about this a lot, and actually I wrote what I thought we might try to turn into a children's book, but it ended up just being kind of a poem, I suppose, called Aria the Embryo. And I think you might get a mention in the poem as well. But I must send it to you. We haven't published it anywhere yet. but I just wrote it as kind of a way to try and explain how, you know, two people can go on a fertility journey and, you know, need some assistance and might not be able to have a baby in the traditional way, and how that might happen. And in our case, how that happened was we used, you know, eggs from Audrey, we used sperm from a donor, and then the baby was in my tummy, you know. And I think using the language is important, you know, saying egg, sperm, donor, you know, saying these words and not just saying like magic, you know, kind of brew and fairies, and, you know, and using actual language. And, you know, I'm no expert on child psychology, but just from raising Ava, I know that she responds, you know, she's almost 4 now, and she responds to being talked to properly. And, you know, she might not necessarily grasp a concept, but she'll hear it and she'll be like, yeah, okay, yeah. And she'll kind of accept it. And as the years go on, she might have more questions about, okay, well, what exactly does that mean? But for now, you know, we talk about it very openly with her, because I think it's important to just be open with children from the time they can talk and they can listen, rather than when they're a bit older, suddenly springing it on them. And obviously, in Ava's case, you know, she has 2 mothers. As soon as she understands anything about how a baby is made, she will know that we had to have some sort of help from a donor. She'll know that. It's not like we're a man and a woman who did IVF that could maybe keep it a secret, which also I don't think is a good idea. But you know what I mean? Like, we have no option but to be very upfront and candid with her about it, you know? So yeah, I think it's important to just be honest and open as soon as you can.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And actually, that's our experience too. We've been talking with patients who had to resource to donation, even heterosexual couples or single women's couples. We have obviously everything. And that question, when to tell, how to manage the information, is actually more critical in heterosexual couples, because they don't, sometimes they have the temptation of keeping the secret, of postponing it. In your case, you have this advantage. There's no way to keep the secret. So you might as well be upfront. And I think for children, this is actually a lot easier than we adults think of.
Absolutely, yeah.
I remember...
They take things, yeah.
I remember one of my 2 daughters. When she was 6, she came to me and she said, "Well, I have a colleague in school whose mother went to Spain to have a baby," and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's fine." And then she married her father later on, and I was, okay, that's perfect. So it was so natural for them. They were not seeing anything out of the ordinary. So she was 6. She explained me that she knew I was working in IVF, but she didn't have probably the notion that I was doing the same thing here. But I find it very curious, because in her class, everyone knew the story and everybody couldn't care less about it. Okay, it was just that family. And so it was pretty normal for everyone involved. Yeah. Actually, we have here a question for you. I will let you answer this. It's someone, Blums. She was asking a question for Ranae. Was the same sperm donor used for both babies?
So the answer is no. We kind of talked about that a little bit, but and this was a big issue for me for a little while. And you know, again, in hindsight, we would have loved to have the same donor. That would be the ideal situation. But we didn't really know when we started this kind of fertility journey that you're supposed to reserve extra sperm. We didn't know. No one told us. So when we did our first round of IVF, we had 7 embryos, and we naively thought that 7 would be loads of embryos to maybe get 2 children out of. And before you knew it, we had used all 7 embryos and we only had 1 daughter. So we tried to get the same donor again, but it wasn't that sperm was not available anymore. And we tried and tried, and we said, you know, does any other couple have it reserved that we could buy it back from them? And they were just like, no, it's not happening. It's not happening. Which was when we were like, okay, let's just start afresh. Let's go to a new clinic. Let's have a better experience. And I think I was pretty upset for about a week or two, you know, and I kept saying to myself, but they won't be full genetic siblings. And then as soon as I kind of got past that, there is not a day, not a minute that thought enters my mind that they are not full siblings. They couldn't be closer sisters if we tried. They are 100% sisters, and it's just the way the things worked out. But I would say, if you are only starting out on your fertility journey, that you should kind of look down the road and perhaps invest in reserving extra sperm if you want more than 1 child.
Yeah, it's true. We here nowadays, we encourage patients to do that. Sometimes it's difficult because, I mean, it's a lot of money. And when we talk about spending even a little more to save sperm, patients tend to say, I'll think about it later. The problem is that things change, and sometimes donors are no longer available. Here at Ferticentro, we have a policy of trying. Well, nowadays, first of all, the Portuguese legislation also changed in that sense, because now the limit of donations for a sperm donor is counted per family. Before it was like 8 pregnancies period, 8 children born period, and not a single one more. And so that was preventing a lot of siblings to be born. So the IVF authorities changed it, and now we can help 8 families with each donor, regardless of the number of babies in each family. So this allows us to manage things well. When we are approaching the limit, the last straws of every donor, we contact the families that have babies with those donors and ask them whether they want to keep the straws or not. So we always try to assure that. So it's another thing that's changed in a good way. Another thing that I would like to ask you, because that's something that patients usually ask us about this, especially in the shared motherhood programs. Sometimes the person that carries the pregnancy, in some cases, they say, well, but in this case, I feel like I'm sort of a surrogate. The child has nothing to do with me. How do you respond to that? Because I think you're the best person to talk about it.
All I can do is speak from my personal experience, and there has not been a single moment in the last kind of 5 years since we started trying for our first baby. Not a single moment have I ever felt like that. And that's not to say that for some people that might not be their experience, but for me, that's been my experience. I mean, it blows my mind to think that I literally carried my wife's baby and it became our baby. That just blows my mind that science can do that. And you know, we took a tiny microscopic egg from her. We used donor sperm, and then that baby grew inside of me, and that baby has my blood, my everything. Like, that baby would not have grown except from my body. You know, it wasn't just a fully formed baby put inside me. It was nothing. It was tiny, and then it was me that nurtured and grew that baby. And then, you know, when she was born, you know, I'm still breastfeeding her, but for 6 months she had nothing else but me giving her food and giving her life. So I just couldn't possibly feel more connected to her than I do. And not for a second would I have felt like a surrogate. And even like the term surrogate is classified as someone who carries a baby with no intention of becoming a parent. So I think if you were to be a surrogate, you always know that that is not your baby. Yes, you are growing it and you are giving it life, but it's a very different kind of scenario. You know, for me and for reciprocal IVF, when you're carrying a child, the intention is always going to be that you are going to be that child's parent, regardless of whether you are genetically connected or not.
Exactly. And on top of that, there is science, because obviously it is impossible. But if we were to transfer the exact same embryo to the womb of two different women, the child that would be born wouldn't be exactly the same, because the whole pregnancy is a process of interaction between your genes and the genes of the baby. Obviously, the baby, 50% of her genetic material comes from Audrey, and the other 50% comes from the sperm donor. However, the growth of that embryo into a baby is regulated by our body, by our genes, who are activating and inactivating the embryo's genes. And so, according to science, your role, the fact that you're not obese, you're not a smoker, you're not drinking alcohol, even the kind of music that you listen to, if you have a stressed life, what you eat, everything associated with your lifestyle has an influence on how that baby developed. So for the person that carries the pregnancy, there's a very important and huge influence on what the baby will be. So, aside from that emotional connection, which is pretty obvious in your case, there is also science stating, no, there is some, actually there are some small parts of RNA that are transmitted from you into the babies. I don't think that has any role, at least until now. That hasn't been proven, but there are genetic material from the person that carries the baby that is actually incorporated in the baby's cells during the pregnancy. But on top of that, and especially because of that, the whole pregnancy process is very important for the development of the baby, and so you're regulating your child's growth. So even from a strictly and cold scientific point of view, it's not the same as being as doing nothing in this case. Okay. Well, another question, this more on the legal side, because here in Portugal we've had also some initial problems when we started doing reciprocal IVF. Well, just a quick note. In Ireland, they say reciprocal IVF. In the UK, they tend to say shared motherhood. Here in Portugal, we call it the ROPA method. In Spain, they also call it ROPA. So there are lots of names for this process. But here, as I was saying, in the early days of reciprocal IVF, people were having difficulties registering their children, because even though our legislation states very clearly two things. First of all, that the embryos obtained during a shared IVF treatment belong to both elements of the couple, regardless of who donated the eggs and who carried the pregnancy. So in case you divorce, actually it is not required for you to be married. For example, in Spain, you're required to be married to do the treatment. And if you split, if you divorce, the embryos belong to the person who donated the eggs. Okay. Here in Portugal, the embryos belong to both elements of the couple who have exactly the same rights over the embryos. If you want to destroy or donate them, wherever it's previewed in legislation, we need a signature from both of you authorizing that. But still, when they were registering the baby, and even though the legislation states that it is very clear that the mother, that baby has two mothers and no father, some registration officers, baby registration officers, I don't know how to translate this, they were sending the cases to court. And some patients really had to present themselves in front of a judge to, well, to say that what they did was what was in the law. I mean, those early processes ended very quickly. As quickly as they started, they were terminated, because the law is very clear on that. But I know that in Ireland things are not the same, and especially because they're doing this under one legislation, and then you're having the baby and registering her in a different country with different legal conditions. So I know that you're an advocate for LGBT parents' rights. So talk to us, share with us some of those problems and what you've been doing.
Okay, so I suppose before we had Ava, like 5 years ago, you know, Ireland, it was a huge thing across the world that Ireland voted for marriage equality. We had a big referendum and Ireland said yes to marriage equality. And that was in 2015. And I suppose myself, along with most people, assumed that once we had marriage equality, we would have equality for the whole family, and that, you know, a child that was born within that would be treated the same as a child born within a marriage between a man and a woman. And we just assumed that that was the case. So when we started our fertility treatment to have Ava, we had no idea what was ahead of us. We just assumed that once we had a child, we would be married, we would be treated as equal parents. When I was about 8 months pregnant, we found out that that would not be the case, and that because I was giving birth, that under Irish law, the person who gives birth to a child is considered the mother, and there's no way to have a second parent recognized unless that person is a man. So we were totally blindsided and shocked and devastated by this. And I suppose that was the start of when we began kind of trying to raise awareness. And, you know, we were on a couple of newspapers and magazines, and we went on TV and we did radio shows just to try to raise awareness, because people didn't know that this was happening. And at the time, we knew that there was a piece of legislation that was coming in that would allow for same-sex or LGBT parents to both be registered as parents. But we didn't realize how narrow the criteria was. And it was only as time went on and we started doing a bit of research, we started talking to other people, we realized that they were trying to bring in a law that would only allow same-sex female couples to be registered as parents if they had done fertility treatment in Ireland with an identifiable donor using their own eggs and not reciprocal IVF, and that the birth took place in Ireland. So there is all of these criteria, and if you didn't meet one of them, you would be excluded. So that would exclude anyone who's done an at-home insemination, reciprocal IVF, treatment abroad, a birth abroad, and then all cases of male parents who perhaps have conceived using surrogate. Yeah. So some people would be covered and everyone else would be just left behind. Yeah. And I suppose when we kind of came to that realization, and it was kind of around the time that I was pregnant with Aria and then Aria was born, it just kind of took off from there. We couldn't sit by and do nothing. So we just really kind of did a lot of work then, just trying to reach whoever we could, you know, writing letters to politicians and trying to get meetings and emails and phone calls and lots of stuff in the media, a lot of stuff on social media. And then I ended up starting a petition last year that ended up getting like 25,000 signatures, just asking for the same recognition that every other parent has. You know, that's all we want. We don't want anything special. We just want to be treated the same as any other parents. We just want to be allowed to care for our children. So that kind of was going really well. And then in October of last year, we ended up coming together with a group of other LGBT parents, and we formed a campaign called Equality for Children, which is on Instagram at Equality for Children. And basically that campaign has one objective, and that is to fight for full legal equality of all children of LGBT parents in Ireland. So until every single child of an LGBT family in Ireland has full legal connection to their parents and full protection of the law, we're not going to stop. So that's been busy, and it's been hard, but we're getting there. And so this law that I spoke to you about that will only cover some people, that came into effect in May of this year. So as of the 5th of May 2020, those people who meet the criteria can now apply to be recognized as parents. And that's retrospective as well. So for children who are already here, their parents can apply to be recognized as their parents. But as I said, it's only covering a small number of families, and it's a step in the right direction, but it's nowhere good enough, because until every child is treated as an equal, it's not equality. Equality isn't just for some people.
Exactly. And why do you think that happened? Do you think this is just ignorance, or is there any kind of prejudice against the LGBT community, or is this just because sometimes in Portugal we have those issues? And
yeah. I think obviously historically there is a lot of prejudice towards minority groups, and obviously we're very historically, again, a very religious country. So that had to have impacted the laws that we have had in the past. And aside from that, we just haven't caught up, so they haven't changed the definition of what a mother is. They've never changed that. The definition of a mother has always been a person who gives birth to a child. And unfortunately, that definition doesn't work anymore, because in the case of surrogacy, a surrogate gives birth to a child, but that surrogate is not a mother.
Of course.
So, things have changed since we have the option of IVF, and since science has advanced, our laws need to change to reflect that. And so I think it's mainly a case of the law not catching up with where we're at in this point in time. And also the fact that it's not a big enough issue, that they haven't put the time into doing something about it. Something like marriage equality was a much bigger issue, because everybody, has someone in their life who is LGBT, and it affected everyone. And people don't necessarily see this as big an issue, because, a lot of LGBT people might not want to have children. So it's a smaller, again, number of people. And also because people don't know that this is going on, that, if every single person knew that this was happening, and if every person knew that, that our children only have one legal parent, and that they don't have any legal connection to their biological parent, people would be outraged. And anyone I talk to about this, they're like, how is that possible? How is that allowed?
Exactly. And how ironic it is. So it's Audrey, who is the genetic mother of the child. She's not recognized as a mother, right? It's just you.
Yeah.
Well, I do hope everything goes well with you. You were, a few years ago, you were also talking about a lawsuit in order to get this. Are you pursuing with that?
Yeah, we're in the middle of it. So we'll see how that goes. We've been pursuing that for about a year and a half. Since Audrey was born, a few weeks after she was born, we started with that, because we're tired of waiting. and we're not going to wait for another 5-10 years until they get around to us, because I think eventually they would legislate for reciprocal IVF and other methods, you know, of that LGBT people have children. But it's not good enough to wait until they decide that they have time to do it. Like, now is when we need that to happen, because there's nothing more important than making sure that your children are safe. And right now they're not safe, because if something happened to me, they would be orphaned.
Yeah.
Simple as that, you know?
It's incredible. Well, let's move to a more pleasant topic. One of the things that I found most interesting we have a message from Pipa Neto. She's a Portuguese, she, or he, I don't know. I can't see if it's too small, the picture. But she's a Portuguese person living in Dublin. So one thing that I found very interesting about your case was that you were telling your story live as it happened. You were writing a blog, which Pipa is a she. It was really interesting, and obviously a risk, because we didn't know how things were, and you were telling your story on a daily basis almost. You are sharing your adventures, and so the blog is still out there in the internet. It's called, do you remember the name?
I think the URL is ivfsharedmotherhood.com. But it's just, if you search shared motherhood Coimbra, you'll find it.
Yeah, it is really interesting because it was written in real time. So you were you were sharing your emotions, your stories, your adventures with the hitting and changing you're also sharing pictures. It was really interesting. And then it was obviously we were lucky enough to
that it worked.
that worked, and also it was really interesting to see that what happened to you next, because you have become this big personality in Ireland. I mean, there is your sort of media profile became very big. I mean, 25,000 signatures on a public petition is incredible. And so it was a pleasure for us to have a small part on that.
Well, I would say it was a very big part, because we wouldn't have our second child if we hadn't come there. So, and she's pretty great.
Okay. So, well, thank you. And what about, how is life with your kids? Are you planning to have more? That's always the question.
We might need to talk to you about this. For people, we do. So that is a huge consideration for us. And we talk about it almost every day, not even joking, because like, as soon as I gave birth to Aria, I remember saying to you, we always planned to have 2 children. But as soon as I gave birth to Aria, I said to Audrey, I want to have another. I don't want this to be the last time that I ever do this. I want to do this again. But then, the first kind of year of her life, and you're not sleeping, and it's just crazy. And, Audrey always said, no, we're done. And I'd always be like, really? Are we done? Are we?
Yeah.
But then, they're sleeping again now. And like a few weeks ago, Audrey was like, oh, I don't think we're done. Okay. So, but it goes back and forth, because on one hand, having 2 children is amazing, and it makes some things a bit easier, maybe going on holiday and your car and where you live. But on the other hand, we do have 3 embryos left, and I think it would be very hard for us to walk away from those 3 embryos and to not try to use them. So I think if we do try for another child, we would probably try with those 3 embryos, not all at once, but we would try with them to see if we were lucky enough to have another child through one of those embryos. And if that didn't work, then we might be done, because I'm not sure if we would. And also Audrey is 40 now. So that's another huge consideration with, you know, egg quality and everything. So I think if we do try, it will be just a transfer, an embryo transfer, and not a full cycle of IVF.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, it's up to you, obviously, but that's actually a very important consideration, because you have 3 embryos. Those were created at the same time as Aria was, and so they remain with the same properties. So let's sort of saying, so they were frozen, so they were considered to be viable embryos. But the problem is that if they don't work, in the meantime, Audrey is 40, and so that changes a lot in her prognosis. This is also works as a message to other patients that are listening to us, because when we're doing this, and actually when we're doing especially shared motherhood treatments, that's not their case. But some couples, they say that sometimes they want to change roles. For instance, the other person also wants to have an ovarian stimulation, and so. And it is also a very interesting question, because we came to notice that our lesbian patients are a lot younger than our heterosexual patients, which is nice, because I don't know why.
I think I know why. I think I know why. It's probably because a lot of you know, same-sex couples come to you because they know they need help conceiving. You know, it's not something that they suddenly wake up one day and they're like, what? We can't have a baby unless we have a donor. But with a lot of heterosexual couples, they might have been putting off having children, or they might have been trying for years and years and years, and they might reach the point when they're kind of just at the age where a woman might not physically be able to do it, and they might then say, okay, we're going to have one last try, and we're going to go to a clinic, you know. But I think that's probably why a lot of people just put off having children and think, oh, it'll be fine, and then they try to conceive and it just doesn't happen naturally.
Actually, I don't totally agree with you on this, because a few days ago I was talking. Do you see this person called That's 18? She's Daniela Sant.
Yeah, I know Daniela. Hi.
So Daniela is a very high-profile blogger and Instagrammer here in Portugal. She also did shared motherhood with Isabel, her wife, and besides, we have Amor Sem Barreiras 2019. They were also doing shared motherhood with us. They're pregnant at the moment.
Oh, congratulations!
But so when Daniela came, Daniela is an example because she was 25 or so when they did the process. And then we did two Instagram lives with her. I mean, she has thousands of followers, so a lot of people was there. And then we were contacted by lots and lots of lesbian couples. Some of them were 19 and 21, 23 and 21. And I was like, it's not usual these days. We don't see people this young wanting to become parents. So I thought, well, this is probably two women in the same couple probably had to live this, because sometimes when there's a man and a woman, it gets dragged a few years. With two women, well, there's no man
I do think that's a really kind of stereotypical thing, but a lot of times it is true that, you know, if you have two women, they'll move in with each other after like 2 weeks, because women are a lot easier usually to commit. Like myself and Audrey have been together like almost 11 years, but we moved in with each other within 6 months. We were living together, you know.
Okay.
So I think women definitely are quicker to commit usually.
Yeah, and make decisions and so on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
lots of advantages.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I think that's it, Ranae. It was really nice having you here, chatting with us. It's a pleasure. It was a pleasure to help you. It will be a pleasure to help you on your number 3, number 4, number 5. I mean, you're Irish. You have to have at least 4 kids.
Oh my God.
Talking about stereotypes.
Can you imagine if we had like triplets? Oh my God.
Well, nowadays we cannot. This is another important message. Legislation also changed this way because, well, this we have Oreo Gain saying that she moved with her wife or partner, I don't know, after 1 week. So, talking about quick decisions. I don't know what I was saying.
Oh, you were saying the legislation, I think, about the number
legislation.
of
Exactly. Now with the vitrification techniques, embryo survival post thawing, I mean, embryo surviving to vitrification, which means freezing and thawing, warming them, it's about 97, 98%. So it's almost 100%. We're very close for this to be completely, to be absolutely the same. And so with this, we can transfer 1 embryo at a time, or maybe 2, and thus avoid the risks of multiple pregnancies. Because obviously we all have this very romantic idea of having triplets and twins and so on, but there are also a lot of obstetric risks. And if you have any other health condition or so, that will be even more complicated. And obviously we want to have healthy children, healthy pregnancies, and so we have to be cautious about that. But I mean, you still have time. You're very young.
I know people who have had triplets. I know 2 people who have had triplets from 2 embryos because both embryos worked and then one of them split. So it can happen.
Yes, it has happened to us. Almost a year and a half ago, we transferred 2 embryos to an Italian lady, age 46, and she had triplets. Well, this patient had a past history of 9 failed treatments when she came to us. And then this is why we agreed to transfer 2, because she was a bad prognosis patient. So one of the embryos divided. Those are real twins, and the other one also implanted. Luckily, the 3 of them were born healthy, and they are very happy. They still have frozen embryos. I don't know what their plans are, but they moved from infertility to large families directly at once.
Amazing.
Okay. Well, once again, Ranae, really nice talking to you. We keep in touch. We will be sharing your campaigns on equality for children. We will ask everyone from Ireland who is watching this to support you. And to all of the other persons who plan to do reciprocal IVF or shared motherhood or ROPA method, or just to have a baby in any other possible way, we will be very happy to help them. So,
great. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye then. Bye. Okay. And so that was it. It was really nice having Ranae here. We will now end this Instagram live broadcast. The film will be available in our Instagram account and also on Instagram TV. And so please feel free to ask everything. There is a question here. We still have time. Well, actually, there's no question here. Well, anyway. Thank you for watching. We will share this on our social media soon. And please, if you have any questions, just feel free to call or send us a private message. Bye-bye. Cheers.